Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3HR Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for your quick briefing on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today in the show, let's explore a scenario most leaders would rather not contemplate. A future where governments step in and require companies to employ a minimum percentage of humans. Sounds extreme? Until you consider the speed and scope of AI adoption and the very real possibility that firms chase short-term efficiency so aggressively that they hollow out both their workforces and eventually their own customer bases. Let's break it down. Recent surveys of executives already point in this direction. A global study reported that 41% of business leaders are using AI to reduce headcount, and nearly a third say they now consider if a role can be done by an AI before hiring a person. If entry-level roles disappear, so do career ladders. That's not science fiction, that's the job apocalypse language that's making headlines recently. And economists aren't uniform about this gloomy scenario. Some expect a net productivity boom from generative AI, with higher GDP and increased employment over the decades. But even the bullish forecasts acknowledge significant job exposure and transition costs. Goldman Sachs has estimated that the equivalent of hundreds of millions of full-time jobs could be exposed to automation, and more recently suggested unemployment will likely tick up during this transition as displaced workers search for new roles, even if the long-run picture improves. This policy takeaway isn't panic, it's prepare. International institutions are already considering the need for guardrails. The IMF argues that AI will affect roughly 40% of jobs globally, with advanced economies feeling the shock sooner, and urges policy interventions to steer gains and cushion against losses. Among proposals on the table, excess profit taxes, adjustments to capital taxation, and stronger social insurance to help absorb displacement. Not quotas for humans at work per se, but you can hear the logic. If private optimization erodes labor income too far, governments will be compelled to rebalance between technologies and people. Closer to the workplace today, we're already seeing laws that push back on automate everything. The EU's AI Act hard codes human oversight for high-risk systems, designing the rules so that people remain in the loop, precisely to protect health, safety, and fundamental rights. And long before the AI Act, Europe's data rules gave individuals rights against being subject to decisions made solely by algorithms that have legal or similarly significant effects. These aren't employment quotas, but they are human equity principles in legal form, preserving human agency and not letting black box optimization overrun people. Here in the US, we're seeing a number of sector-specific guardrails. New York City's Local Law 144 forces bias audits and notices for automated hiring tools. Colorado's new AI law will require developers and deployers of high-risk AI to use reasonable care to prevent algorithmic discrimination, with disclosures, impact assessments, and rights to human review. And New York State's 2024 law for public agencies goes further by limiting the ability to reduce public employees' functions or hours due to generative AI without safeguards and impact reviews. Now, these aren't mandates to employ a fixed share of humans, but they're unmistakably moving policy towards don't automate people out of their rights and their livelihoods without some accountability. Why might hard quotas eventually enter the conversation? Well, consider demand. If companies automate away large swaths of jobs, labor income falls, and when labor income falls, consumer demand suffers. An economy of ultra-efficient producers with fewer wage-earning customers is a recipe for stagnation, political backlash, or both. We saw similar debates with earlier waves of automation, but this time the affected roles aren't only routine manual jobs. Large shares of cognitive and clerical tasks are exposed as well. International organizations like the ILO and the OECD warn that while AI can augment many roles, a meaningful slice of occupations faces a higher automation risk, and the early exposure is disproportionately in entry-level and clerical pathways that matter for upward mobility. And policymakers are already test-driving some ideas aimed at preserving the social contract, while technology leaps ahead of labor markets. Robot taxes, or more precisely, neutral tax treatment of automation, so the state doesn't unwittingly subsidize replacing humans, have been debated from academia to parliaments. South Korea even pared back some automation tax incentives to slow the bias towards capital over labor. So whether or not you like that policy, it's evidence of a world tilting towards equilibrium, one where we keep productivity gains but without starving households of income. So here's the cautionary tale. If we let the pendulum swing to AI everywhere, humans nowhere, we don't just risk layoffs, we risk shrinking the very market that companies depend on. We risk severing training ladders and leadership pipelines by wiping out junior roles. And we risk deepening inequality and social bitterness that invites heavy-handed policy interventions later. And once public trust erodes, regulation can move fast and swiftly. So what can HR leaders do right now to stand up for their people and for the long-term health of their businesses? First, codify human in the loop as a business principle, not just a compliance checkbox. And design your AI deployments with clear points where people supervise, override, and continuously improve the system. Second, protect entry points. If AI chews up entry-level work, you need to create rotational programs, mentorship pairings, and apprenticeship schemes inside the AI-assisted workflows so early career talent still learns on the job. Third, publish impact assessments in plain language. You can look to Colorado's model and declare where you're using high-risk AI, summarize foreseeable risks, document how you'll mitigate them, and give people the rights to appeal consequential decisions for human review. And finally, be the conscience of the company. HR is uniquely positioned to fuse business imperatives with community well-being. Engage the local workforce boards and community colleges. Support policies that expand mobility. If the private sector underinvests in people, the public sector will eventually impose constraints. Better to lead now than be forced into making remedies later on. So let's end with this. AI will almost certainly make us more productive, but productivity without people isn't prosperity. It's just a false signal. The job of HR leadership in 2025 and beyond is to keep humans in the loop, in the plan, and in the budget. Stand up for the people inside your organization and in your community, so we never have to test the question of human employment quotas, because the best equity rule is the one we don't need to write. That's it for the Workplace Minute. Thanks so much for listening, and a big thank you to WorkHuman for supporting the Workplace Minute. If this episode made you think about how you are balancing AI and automation with the people in your organization, please share it with a colleague. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.